What comes to your mind when you hear the word research? Yes, a picture of a scientist conducting experiment in his lab with all his beakers, a test tube, etc. comes to your mind. But research are not always related to science. Research are undertaken in all the fields of study and all of them present its own set of challenges. Research is a systematic inquiry that investigates hypotheses, suggests new interpretations or data or texts and poses new questions to future research to explore. Basically, a research consists of asking a question that nobody has asked before, doing the necessary work to find the answer, and communicating the knowledge you have acquired to a larger audience. We have already learnt about types of research and their purposes involved in media production. But whatever might be the purpose, the methods and techniques used for the research remains the same. There are four main types of research that you need to understand. They are primary, secondary, quantitative, qualitative. First, let us look at primary and secondary research methods and distinguish them. Primary research is original and conducted for a specific purpose. Here, we collect some new data using different techniques. We may conduct a survey, interview the people who might have the information or present them a questionnaire and ask them to answer. In a secondary research, we don't actually collect the information but use the data and information that has already been collected and published by someone else by doing primary research on the subject. Referring to books, journals and looking up to the internet for the information that already exists are the examples of secondary research. Many media organizations will also use the data and information that has already been gathered and analyzed by another company. Primary and secondary research are distinguished on the basis of levels research. But qualitative and quantitative research are distinguished depending upon the outcome of the research, which may be quantitative or qualitative type of information and data. Quantitative research, as the name suggests, gives the data that is countable or measurable. It is the numerical data which can be presented in the form of tables, graphs and diagrams. Quantitative data can be obtained both by the primary and secondary data. It may be ratings given by the audience to your product or the circulation figures of your product. For example, the number of people from an area who buy your magazine every week is a type of quantitative data. Qualitative research is obtaining information on the people's opinions, reviews and preferences about your product. This also can be obtained by both primary and secondary research techniques. Qualitative data is of major importance in the media industry as it is focused on the individual opinion. It is important to know what a person or a group thinks about a particularly. For example, you may inquire another part of the country what he feels about the other part of the country, that is in the production of TV shows. Depending on the nature of the research and the types of questions asked, it is not always possible to analyze the resulting information statistically, particularly if the responses are personal and subjective. Primary research. Interviews and questionnaires. Usually, we can get a lot of information by questioning the people. It is one of the important techniques used by or while conducting a primary research. These questions can be presented in many ways during the research, such as conducting face-to-face interviews with individuals or a selected number of people, prepare a questionnaire and use it to survey a larger group of people at once, organizing a focus group. Face-to-face interviews with the selected individuals are very effective as it provides qualitative data which can be reliable. But a major drawback of this method is it is very time-consuming. Imagine if you have to ask 10 questions to 100 different individuals. Also, sometimes if the question is personal and sensitive, the respondent may feel uncomfortable and not willing to answer the question or may give a wrong answer which will affect the result of research. So, the use of questionnaires is perhaps the most popular form of research. But here also, researcher must be careful about the form and structure of the question and its presentation. Otherwise, the answer may not be valid and reliable for your research. Design of questionnaire. Consider you are sending the questionnaire to your subject for them to fill in. The questionnaire must look professional and attractive with all the necessary instructions for them to fill it. A suitable title must be given to the questionnaire along with a brief introduction. The introduction must be short and include who you are, why are you conducting this survey, and what the result will be used for. It must be clear for the respondents that how they are going to be helpful for your research. You should also include the instructions on how the survey should be completed. If you're present at the place of the survey, you can instruct them yourself. But if they have to fill it by themselves, then proper instructions are very important. After completing the survey, you must collect all the questionnaires or tell them where to return it. The question. You should begin your questionnaire with simple and straightforward questions that are easy to answer. You may begin with questions like age, sex, occupation, etc., which will get them into answer the questionnaire and also gives us the demographic information for the analysis of the result. It gives you an idea of sample set of people you have surveyed. There are two types of questions, open and closed questions. Open questions allow the person answering to give his or her views and opinions on a particular subject. On the other hand, while answering a closed question, a person should pick an answer from a range of given options. When using a closed question, you should include the potential answers on the questionnaire itself. With a tick box, since it have limited answers and they are specified in all the questionnaire, respondent have to do is to pick up an option from it, which is relatively easier than writing the whole answer. But if you use this method, make sure that you have included all the potential answers. Sometimes options like other or don't know can be included. Answers for a closed question are a quantifiable data which can be represented in the form of graphs and charts. For example, you know the people who tick the option more than 1 GB data for the question how much mobile data they are using every day. However, open style questions provide qualitative data where people have to write down a personal opinion on something, which can give a more meaningful insight. For example, you may ask them why they like or hate a particular character from a TV show. Sometimes, both open and closed question can be interlinked together. For example, do you use Facebook every day? Yes or no? If your answer for 10A is yes, describe how we can improve the new profile picture filters. Using a scale for some questions, you might want to gauge the extent to which the respondents agree or disagree with a particular statement or the degree of their feelings on a subject. Here, you can use a rating system in a response scale of some kind. Types of scale include the following. A Likert scale asks the respondents how strongly he or she agrees or disagrees with a series of statements. A rank order scale asks the respondent to indicate the order of preference from a list of given answers, usually through the use of numbers. Semantic differential scales use a sliding scale between two opposing words and ask respondents to indicate where on the scale their opinion lies. To make the questionnaire look attractive and appealing, you can group specific questions together into different sections with separate heading. It will also make it easier for the respondent to read and understand the question so that he can complete within less time. In formulating the question, you should use simple language to avoid any kind of misunderstandings. You should also try to avoid leading questions with an emotive language, which causes strong feelings, which might alter the answer of the respondent. Questions that are too complex or may go unanswered or may be invalid even if they are answered. Presenting the questionnaire. The way you present your questions is also very important. There are 4 main ways in which you can present your questionnaire to your sample audience. You can Meet the people personally and ask them the questions face to face. Ask the question over a telephone. Send the questionnaire to the people either through post or email. Include the questionnaire in a magazine or newsletter and ask respondents to post it back or hand it in. Here, by the first three ways, you can identify and select the audience and target your questions to them. You can be sure that you are covering a population that consists of people of all age, gender and culture. But with the last method, you have no control over your respondents and they may have or may not send your answers back to you. Though questioning people over phone or face to face is very time consuming, especially if you have large sample of people to cover, it allows you to explain your questions clearly to the subject in case of any misunderstanding. Since they are answering orally, you should find a way to record their answers. If you send the questions through email or if you include it in some publication, it gives people a chance to answer the questions in their own time, in their own environment. Here, you may sometimes get the confidential information, but you have little control over how people will actually complete the questionnaire and return it to you. Pre-testing. It is better to pre-test your questionnaire on a small sample of your audience before you conduct your full survey on a larger set of people. It will allow you to identify any potential problems with the questions, options, or the design and layout of the questionnaire itself. You can make the necessary changes before sending it to full survey. You may also be able to identify some other responses under the other option that may be better to include as one of the specified options. Focus groups. Focus groups are pre-selected groups of people who are seen to represent the target audience. They tend to be used by marketing and advertising agencies to test the likely responses of the target audience towards the product that is being advertised, as well as to the advert itself. Film studios also use focus groups in preview screenings of major films prior to release. This is to ensure that the audience reaction is the desired one. If you're going to use a focus group as part of your research, you will need to think carefully about who you invite to be in the group, where you will hold it, how you're going to manage the discussion, and what you will use to record what is said. Secondary research. There is so much information and research data already available in the books, journals, and on the internet. You may refer these in the form of secondary research either to supplement or support the data that you are collected by doing a primary research. Before undertaking a secondary research, make sure that the source you are using is reliable and valid. It is also important to know why the research was originally conducted, where it is conducted, and who conducted it. For example, a research conducted in Europe with European people as sample sets may not be reliable to relevant to Indian conditions. Presentation of research results. Once you have completed a research project by primary and secondary research and collecting quantitative or qualitative data, you are all set to present the results of your research. This can be done either in the written format or oral presentation. But in both the cases, the content of your presentation should include the following key elements. An introduction to your research in which you outline its purpose and aims, an explanation of the methods and techniques that you have used, the research data itself presented in a suitable form such as tables, charts, graphs or diagrams, a summary of your main findings, the results, the conclusions that you can make from these findings. Oral presentation. Oral presentations are often used in the media industry to pitch new ideas to a potential client or producer. And these pitches will often include details of research that has been carried out to support the proposals being made. The sorts of people who would be in the audience for such a presentation would be those who would have the final say as to whether your idea would go into production or not. So here, Your presentation skills matter more than anything. You need to develop good presentation and communication skills. The communication skills include both verbal and non-verbal communication skills. The verbal communication is what you orally say to your audience, but non-verbal communication is the way you present yourself to the audience, which includes your dress orientation, hand and arm movements, facial expressions, etc. Paying attention to these aspects of non-verbal communication, your presentation will be effective and more professional. It makes you feel more confident. Posture and orientation. The way in which you hold and position your body can also communicate a lot of information to your audience. You need to demonstrate that you are a confident, professional person who is in control and knows what you're doing. Your audience will not appreciate looking at the back of your head while you talk to the screen behind you. Neither will they think positively about you if you are slumped in a chair or having your arms folded across your body in a defensive manner. Hand and arm movements. You will probably be nervous when you are presenting to your audience, and telltale signs of these nerves can leak out and distract from what you are trying to communicate. An audience can end up focusing on the presenter who paces up and down, waves his or her arms around too much, rather than listening and trying to understand what he or she is proposing. Facial expressions. Facial expressions are often the hardest part of non-verbal communication to control, so can be another area where your nervousness can leak out. Smiling is good. It makes you feel better and puts your audience at ease. Eye contact is also very important. It can be used to engage your audience and direct questions to individuals. Think carefully about all of these aspects of non-verbal communication and try to control and use them to your advantage. Get it right and you will communicate integrity and professionalism. But do not worry too much if you get into wrong at this stage. It is all part of the learning process. You will gain more confidence and skill with every presentation that you give. Verbal communication. Although non-verbal communication is very important, you will also need to say something in your presentation. Speaking in front of a group can be a daunting task. Even the most confident of people can be extremely nervous before making a speech. Paralanguage. Paralanguage refers to the way in which you speak rather than content of what you say. It is another aspect of your presentation that you will need to try to control and manipulate to your advantage. Some people have a tendency to speak too quickly when nervous, as if they were trying to get to end as quickly as possible. You will need to slow down and set the pitch, tone and pace of your spoken language so that you are communicating effectively to your audience. When people are nervous or are trying to think of what to say next, they will try to include fillers such as ERM, you know, and like, and will hesitate between words. You will sound more confident and come across in a more professional way if you are able to avoid and limit the use of such fillers and hesitations. Visual aids. When planning your presentation, think of some visual aids which you can possibly make use of. You might want to use overhead transparency, OHT slides or presentation slides to help you in your talk and provide an alternative visual reference point to yourself. You might also consider posters, flip charts to summarize or make handouts for your audience to read either in the meeting itself or after it has finished. Written report presentations. Sometimes you may have to present your research report as a written document and not by oral presentation. Thus, it is important that you present all your written work in a logical and coherent manner. Spelling and punctuation and grammar. In your presentation, you had to take care to control your verbal and non-verbal communication so that you presented a professional and organized image. You now need to continue with this in your written report by ensuring that your spelling, punctuation and grammar do not let you down. There is no set way of writing up your final report. However, You do need to make sure that it is clearly, logically used, appropriate headings and subheadings. You must also take care to check your spelling and grammar. Structure. The structure of your report should be similar to that of your oral presentation. Though, of course, there is the opportunity for you to include more detailed information in a written report, your report should include the following elements. An introduction in which you explain its purpose and aims, an explanation of the research methods and techniques that you have used, the research data itself presented in a suitable form such as tables, charts, graphs or diagrams, an explanation of what you found out from analyzing the results of your research, the conclusions that you can make from these results, any proposals that you are making based on these conclusions. Bibliography. Because this is a written report, you should also include a bibliography in which you detail the books that you have used in your research project. You should also include details of any other sources of information, including websites, newspapers, and magazines. Additional research materials such as copies of any questionnaires that you used, tally charts and respondents' answers should be included in any appendices section of the report. In this episode, we studied different methods and techniques in which the research can be done. Primary research is original and conducted for a specific purpose. Here, we collect some new data using different techniques. Secondary research is conducted by referring to the books, journals, where the information has already been collected and published by someone else by doing primary research. Quantitative research provides the data that is countable or measurable. On the other hand, qualitative research is obtaining information on the people's opinions, reviews and preferences about your product. Primary research can be conducted by interviewing the people. Questionnaires can be prepared and given to people to conduct the surveys. In the end, we learned how to present the research report. The research report can be presented orally using some visual aids. It can also be submitted as a written report.